Well, hello and welcome to this special edition of Pawsitive Impact. My name is Rob Johnson. We are in a different location today. We're actually in Studio B at Speakeasy Podcast Network, but Jimmy and Jerry wanted to have a special edition to update all of the customers at the Bear Factory on just some things that have been going on in light of the election and heading into 2025. So, Jimmy, I'll start with you. Why are we here today?
I figured it'd be a lot easier to sit down and have an open, candid conversation between the three of us because last week alone I was probably on the phone anywhere from 5 to 8 hours just talking to various customers about, now that Trump's been elected in office, what does that mean? Because there's all these talk of tariffs and, what does the geopolitical landscape look like and, what's going on with inventory. So this is definitely a way to try to help preserve some of our staff's time as well as my time by having, taking the high points of all those conversations from last week.
Absolutely. And this certainly isn't the first time tariffs have been an issue on the docket for the Bear Factory, looking back to 2019 with what Trump did with tariffs. So, Jerry, I'll kick it over to you for a moment. Just kind of give us a rundown on where we're at with tariffs, what the forecast looks like, and what Bear Factory customers can expect.
So in 2019, when COVID hit and, Trump was, really pushing the bandwagon on sanctions against certain countries and so on, and tariffs became a major play factor at that time. What we had to go through was settle down our company. Are we going to be looking at a 15, 20% tariff on every single product that came into the Bear Factory? And what it ended up happening at that time was the only product that got hit with a tariff was an electronic product, was our recordable sound module. And the reason for that tariff was what the last, not this past administration, but Trump's administration, what they were looking to do was try to push an issue which was competitiveness. So electronics are a very competitive market in the United States. Toys are a different kind of product, where in the United States, very, very few toys are made. Most of them are made overseas, in different, Asian countries. And with that being said, the United States really doesn't have an opportunity to go ahead and come through with manufacturing of any kind of toy base. I'll go back to 24 years ago when I first started the company. I looked at a lot of past companies that I worked with in another prior company that I used to own, and it ended up that the manufacturing at that time, we would import the fabrics and build the bears here in the United States. We were looking at about $8 just to manufacture the bears at that time, which was significantly higher than it would be, out of China. I don't even know what it would cost now, in today's market to have those same manufacturing done in the United States. So what we really had to do is really look at how this sanctions, the tariffs were really going to move forward. And what we're hearing and seeing is it's still going to move back to that competitiveness of, is there somebody or something of a company nature, of a product nature in the United States that would be competitive if it stayed here and manufactured here? That's where we're hearing and hopefully seeing that tariffs would be put on products coming into the United States.
I see. So right now, looking at historical trends, there hasn't been a huge surge, even from, Americans who have, clamored for, more toys to be made here just because the infrastructure isn't here for it.
Right. And, you can't go ahead and have a $1,000, toy. Nobody's going to buy it. So either there is going to be a tariff, and if there is, then we'll have to deal with it. But we're also looking at how do we maintain a structure in the United States with with things that are happening, which would mean that the product has to be able to be priced correctly. And inflation is going to hit us hard if we have to have these, inflationary, bumps with the tariff.
People are always looking for a plush product made in the U.S. And the only time we've touched on this in other podcasts, the only time you're ever going to find a plush made in the U.S. is a really, really high quality, handcrafted, $65 retail plush. An example is, ironically, 45 minutes from here over in Chelsea, Michigan, you have Chelsea Teddy Bear Company. They hand make and hand stitch those bears, but those are, limited runs, collector edition type of plush. And that's just, we're an experience. We're not that kind of company. So, as far as tariffs go, plush was never made here to begin with, and it was then moved overseas. So, right now we're not concerned with a tariff on plush. Now, we get motors for our stuffing machines made abroad. That is something that we are a little concerned with and focused on. So, what are we doing for that? Well, if we had a 25% tariff on our motors, that would change, the pricing of the stuffing machine. So we're taking measures and evaluating any type of items like that could be impacted, and putting those productions in play now so that we can be prepared and backstock ourselves for at least 18 months. And then that'll give us some time should a tariff take place where we have backup inventory. We can give customers ample time as far as price increases, but, spending money right now, a couple $100,000, and just backstocking these components that could be hit, we've agreed that is a well worth investment in comparison to being, hit with something later on and then just kind of scrambling to figure it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And the important thing to know is no one's certain what this is going to look like quite yet. And, the other thing to look at when it comes to tariffs is there an ecosystem in place where building it in America makes sense? So when there was tariffs on what was happening with Toyota, it made sense for them to come over here and build plants, make vehicles. It made sense because the infrastructure was here. With toys, there isn't that same receiving infrastructure to have it here. And a $65 bear is not necessarily accessible for every economic level, whereas what you guys are doing with the Bear Factory, it certainly is.
Yeah, and I'd spent a lot of time in 2019 talking to, third-party groups that had relationships in Central America as well as Mexico. And what we found is that there are toys being made in Central America, Honduras and Ecuador specifically. We even looking at like India and Vietnam. Specifically with Central America, they're sourcing all their materials and fabrics from China, and so we're not removing ourselves out of China, and that there's a huge sourcing issue because the Chinese prioritize their domestic factories for priority for their fabrics and materials. So what usually would take a couple of weeks to get fabrics for a product in China, that could take anywhere from 3 to 6 months if you're trying to move it elsewhere globally. Because, if you're buying plush fabrics, what are you doing with plush fabrics? You're making plush, and they want that business to stay in China within their borders. So it's just not, if you're going to remove yourself out of China out of fear for tariffs, then do it the right way and totally find somewhere else for the labor, for the infrastructure, as well as the textiles. But if you can't remove all of it, then what's the point?
Well, it becomes a logistical nightmare. When you look at an item, one piece of plush, it may have 7 to 9 to 12 different components in every single animal. So if you take every animal in the line, and let's just say that you have 100 for a number, you're talking 100 times potentially 12 pieces, of a section of an animal. And, the logistical nightmare of making sure that all of that's in stock and that gets in. And what happens if the eye that you're looking for is out of stock and the rest of the thing was manufactured already, in, say, Central America or Mexico? It just becomes an absolute nightmare.
So we've taken, we feel confident in what the outlook looks like. And I'll even make mention that, during Trump's first administration, those are some of the greatest growth years in recent time for the Bear Factory. Obviously, we came into 2020 and everyone took a hit. We survived. Came out of 2021 and 2022, everyone was pretty much on a consumer hangover and they just wanted to buy. So those were big years for us too. But 2023, under the current administration, we didn't have that great of growth. And we're hearing from a lot of our small business owners too that, they're struggling. Like, inflation is tough right now. So as far as a business owner, we're very optimistic about what the next 4 years is going to look like. Obviously, from if you want to talk environmental, there's those types of things, but we try to be very bipartisan when it comes to conversations of politics. But the reality is we have customers who call us who are very passionate one way or the other, and we don't really like to talk about it because I'm a humble teddy bear maker. But we are very optimistic about the economy should things replicate the way that they did in the previous administration.
Well, we've had a lot of issues come up from 2019. 2019, the cost of a container, a 40-foot, what they call high cube container, used to run us around $4,800 per container. During the peak of COVID, they were at $32,000 a container. And how does a company even plan for that? So you end up having millions and millions and millions of dollars of inventory just in the fact of what the extra percentage of that shipping cost was in product. The only time you get that back is raise your cost of your product, and then you have to liquidate that product, get it off of your floor, and sell it before you ever get that revenue back. So now, we're in another one of those kind of situations where the amount of containers, they went down to $4,500 to $5,000 per container. They're back up to $13,000 again because of the Mideast situation and the steamship lines. They go ahead and they pull ships just to increase the amount of revenue that they can make. Once they make that revenue, they knew that they could get away with it from 2019, and they're doing it again. So for every single $5,000 increase, call it more than the $5,000 base cost, is about 25 cents per piece. If we have 25,000 pieces of plush in one container, you can see how that cost factor just escalates crazy across the board.
So and that's probably a great segue too into talking about, what does 2025 look like? Because another reason for this wanting to sit down today is talking about inventory. We're deep into the holiday season right now, and we saw the writing on the wall back in early August with our production schedules that we were going to be in a world of hurt. We're almost out of stock on 50% of the plush line right now. And we have people, I was listening and Libby picked up a phone call, I was on speaker, and, thanks for calling the Bear Factory. This is Libby. How can I help you? And the customer just goes, "You got any product yet?" And like, I get it. I totally get it. I get it that people, we're in the thick of the busiest time of year, and a big identity for us is always having inventory, always relying on us. And a few factors that have contributed to us being in the position we are right now is in order for us to source the recycled fabrics, it's taken about an extra 30 days right now. Historically, we used to be 90 days door to door?
Door to door, 90 days, maybe even shorter than that. So the factory in China would go ahead and place the fabric order, usually have it within 3 to 5 days. They would be done with production usually in 30 to 40 days more, and then it's on the water, and then it's to us. So we were always planning on a 90-day cycle.
Now, we came out of COVID planning on 120 days just because we like to add that buffer. That just got eaten up by the extra 30 days for sourcing. ocean freight historically is 30 days from the time that it's picked up to the time that it's delivered. We're sitting at a healthy 60 days right now between, there's a Canadian rail strike this summer. You had the East Coast port strike. There's another Canadian strike that just, the minister, the Minister of Trade.
Minister of Trade
stepped in and said, hey, you guys need to keep working while you figure this out. But someone who's actually tuned in to that, let's say example, the East Coast strike. Well, they were only shut down, I think 5 or 6 days, not even quite full a week. Well, if you think about it, those ports are shut down. All the containers are still coming. So now you have a giant, traffic jam of containers. So we basically factor in every day that a strike takes place is about a week delay for a container. That's what happened with the Canadian rail strike. That's what we planned for with the East Coast port strike. So, we're dealing with 60-day transit times right now. So now we're at an extra 60 days in our production time that we just weren't prepared for. And no one told us that, hey, this is happening. It just kind of happened and fell in our lap.
And you couldn't even get ships to be loaded in China. And then, we're looking at prepays to even have an established position to have the ship loaded with your product. So everything just went absolutely nuts. And, Jimmy's done a great job at doing, bringing the product in, getting it here. But the problem is we don't control any of these things, So even if your product was off of the ship and it was on the dock, and it was first off, and there was a strike that came in, now you're getting buried with all of the other product that came off of the ships. And so that stuff that you were first in, you're going to be last out.
It's just the things that we have to do. Jerry always talks about, how hard we have to work now in comparison to how hard they had to work 20 years ago. It's just, there's always something. And this isn't us complaining. It's just... or making excuses. It's just the reality of the situation.
Well, I think it's really helpful for people to see all the logistics that go into this. It's not like you guys, forgot to hit, add to cart on the Amazon, order button. Like there's so many more logistics to this business. And I love that you called me and said, we need to get this podcast done and just let everyone know what's going on and kind of a state of the union for where we're currently at in 2025. And this goes back to what I've talked about on the podcast, almost in every episode, is how transparent and open you guys are about the business. And that's why people have the longevity that they do with you, is because of that. So I'm glad we were able to sit down and make the time today to go through all of this.
Yeah, no, it was great. And we feel really good, going into 2025 right now. We've, taken the necessary actions 90 days ago with expanding our supply chain, introducing some, new partners as far as sourcing and fabrication, running with, multiple ocean freight companies so that we don't have all of our eggs in one basket if someone's experiencing an issue. So there's a lot that we've done to beef up our supply chain even again, because we did a lot in 2022 when we hit some serious inventory issues. But as of right now, as it stands, with Chinese New Year in February, we feel very confident in all of our productions finishing up going into Chinese New Year and us to be in a stock positive position again come the end of February, going into spring break season right now, which is good news for everyone because there's a light at the end of the tunnel.
That's great. Jerry, anything to add before we close today?
No, Jimmy's really worked hard at, really moving us into the position that we are. Again, a lot of this stuff is out of our control. We have to eyeball it the same as our customers have to eyeball what's going to happen. We do have, some inside information, but, is the information that we get correct? Hopefully it is, and we can move forward on a good note from there.
All right, everyone, that's going to wrap up this special edition of Pawsitive Impact. I want to remind you all that season 2 is coming in early 2025, so be on the lookout for that. Apart from that, we'll see you soon. Take care.